What is up, and welcome to the Red and Bold Show. I am your host, Marc Adams. You can find me at 49ers Camelot. I am joined by my co-host, Anthony Robertson, who you can find at 49ers Cutback. We're thrilled to have you here with us to talk 49ers football. Even though things aren't going the way we want, we're still here. And hey, we're still performing at a really high level. What's up, Ant? How are you doing?
Doing well. Yeah, no missed assignments from us. Still executing at a high level. Hasn't been the way the 49ers have went about this season. And this season has been interesting just from the high hopes of what happened last year with the Super Bowl to some of the big hits when it came to some of the injuries and things that have befell the 49ers this season. And what's interesting is we're still at a time and place where we don't exactly know what is to make of the 49ers season. Is this thing over? Are the 49ers done, or is there still a opportunity for them to make the playoffs? And with that being said, there are some people that don't want the 49ers to make the playoffs, whether they have a chance or not. And so it's an interesting time. There's always a lot to talk about with this football team, and we're going to get into all that, I'm sure. But it has been just one of the craziest seasons, I think, that since I've been covering the team that they've had. And it's been crazy to talk about, and fans are all over the place with their feelings on things, and I think it's interesting.
Yeah, it's weird that fans would not want their team to make the postseason, and I understand they think it's a lost cause. Let's just get to the draft, have as high of a draft pick as we can get. But the problem is the 49ers haven't shown a great they don't have a great track record when it comes to drafting in the first round. They've hit on a couple like Nick Bosa, but there's just been so many that they've missed on. So Josh is in the chat. What's up, Josh? He said, don't see us winning 5 straight, especially with Detroit on the schedule. I completely agree. I don't see that either. I mean, I don't expect them to lose the next 5. It is a possibility. It's possible they could win the next 5, but just the way that they've played this year, it doesn't seem likely that they're going to win out.
Yeah, the reason that people are still hopeful, and I kind of put myself in that same category where I'm not ready to write the season off, is when you look at the games that they have coming up, they're winnable football games. Not Detroit so much. I think Detroit's going to be one of those tough ones. You looked at the Bills. You look at Detroit kind of in the same category as a really good football team. Your only advantage is you're not playing on the road. You're playing at home. But when you're talking about the games 4 of the next 5, you've got Chicago. That's a winnable football game. Now, you have to play well to win. We all know that. But let's just say they do. That's a winnable football game. The Rams at home on Thursday Night Football. That's a winnable football game. The Miami Dolphins is a winnable football game because you're coming off a mini bye traveling to the East Coast. So that kind of negates some of the travel. Then you've got Detroit. Then you've got Arizona in Arizona, which depending on how everything goes, and there a lot of things have to go the 49ers way with teams winning and losing and all that situation. But there is an avenue for them to be able to do it. So that's kind of the conversation. And if they weren't winnable football games, we wouldn't have this conversation. We'd be writing it off. If they had, Detroit and Buffalo still to come up, or, Detroit and Kansas City, we'd probably say this thing is over. But with one game that's really the tough spot to get over, 4 out of 5 might actually still get you in the playoffs, which is interesting. Now, a loss to Chicago, a loss to LA, or even a Seattle victory over Arizona, and I think this thing might be a little bit of a wrap, and the 49ers season would fall short. But it's not over till it's over, and you just never know.
Yeah, it's just been a weird thing. From the time that Dre Greenlaw ruptured his Achilles coming back onto the field in the Super Bowl, it's just gone downhill. Losing the Super Bowl, I think, has really taken a toll on this team. The Super Bowl hangover thing is real. It's not just some excuse. It's a real thing. And when you work like the players and the coaches have worked, you continually go a long way in the playoffs over and over, and then you lose the way that they've lost. Those things really affect you emotionally, mentally, and I think that's what's happened. And then you have the Ayuk holdout, the Trent Williams holdout. There was the McCaffrey situation where he didn't show up there at first in the offseason. Then he's dealing with an injury. They're suffering injury after injury after injury. And Ricky Pearsall being shot. 2 players have now lost children. So just a horrible season that I'm sure they would like to forget. So let's talk about that Buffalo game just real quick. I don't believe that this team quit in that game. I just think to me, they looked overmatched, partly because of the injury situation. I mean, no Trent, no Bosa, but I don't know if they were overmatched or underprepared or both. What did you like? What did you not like? What did it look like to you? Were they overmatched? Were they underprepared? Was it both? What did you see?
Well, I thought that as far as the offense goes, I thought they were definitely prepared. Some of the things they were doing early were taking advantage of the Buffalo Bills' aggressiveness, and we seen Kyle Shanahan going to counter run plays, 3-4 plays into the game, and taking advantage of their aggressiveness. And McCaffrey was getting huge runs in the run game, and so I thought I saw an offense that looked pretty prepared for the situation. Now, I thought when it came to the elements, that definitely slowed the 49ers receivers down to a screeching halt. They could not get anything going as far as getting open in routes. Anytime that they were looking to make a break, it looked funny. I actually pointed out there's one Jawan Jennings catch that he makes that's for a big third down, and he's literally falling, like slipping around. It looks like he's running on ice as he catches the football, and those things were almost comical. You don't want to laugh, but that was the real situation they were playing in. And I do think that this game got out of hand because once the quicksand set in and you're trying to do too much to come back, you start making mistakes. And once the mistakes started rolling in, this football team could not overcome those mistakes. And going into this game, the Buffalo Bills were plus 14 in turnover differential, number 1 team in the NFL, and it reared its ugly head again. You can't win games turning over the football. That's what the 49ers did. I did believe that the defense came out with a good game plan initially. But as Buffalo adjusted to the elements and started adding an extra offensive lineman, which they do 35% of the time anyways, I didn't like the 49ers adjustment with their personnel groupings. There were some bad personnel groupings that saw little guys like Jair Brown or even McLeod in the slot going against offensive linemen or big tight ends, and that was a big advantage for the Buffalo Bills. So I thought that there were some adjustments I liked. I thought Nick Sorensen did some things that I've been calling for, even putting Tashawn Gibson out there for some 3 safety looks, which is great, especially on 3rd and 10. So there were some adjustments, but not enough. And I thought that really reared its ugly head. So in that department, adjusting as the game went on, I thought that they didn't prepare or didn't play as good. And then sometimes they're just overmatched because the Buffalo Bills are a really good football team, and the 49ers still have some holes on defense, especially when you look out there on the field at one point. There's no Fred Warner, there's no Devondre Campbell, and you've got Jalen Graham and D. Winters manning the middle, and that did not work out well.
Yeah, you even go back to I think it was the 49ers' first drive where I don't remember. I feel like it was Jawan Jennings maybe went in motion, and it looked like he tripped over somebody's foot.
That was Debo tripping on Jawan. Yeah.
Okay, so I had it backwards. Yeah, even that, I'm like, what in the world? This just doesn't look like it's going to be our night, but it is what it is. I read a thing. I don't recall where I saw this, but it said that the 49ers lead the league in maybe time of possession on offense, which shows that they're moving the ball, but they just, once they get into the red zone, just for some reason can't get it into the end zone. And so as we saw in this game, when you have to kick field goals against a guy like Josh Allen, you're going to lose. When you have to kick field goals and you're in a snowy game and you miss those field goals, some of them, that doesn't help. And then when you start turning the ball over, like what you mentioned, that makes things even worse. So yeah, that's Interesting. Josh said bottom 5 in turnovers on offense. So that's really bad. And that's uncharacteristic of this team. CJ Gray is in the chat. He said Nick Wright is doing his victory lap. I assume that is because Nick Wright is the anti Brock Purdy fan. He's not a fan of Brock Purdy. So I assume that's what that's about. And we'll get to that a little bit. But just interesting to see how they've played. I mean, Brock Purdy with any kind of wet ball just seems to not be at his best. Want to ask you a question about Ricky Pearsall. He was shut out for the 3rd consecutive game. We've talked about this a little bit before. What do you think is the issue? Is it him? Is it the quarterback? Is it something else? What's going on with him? Because your first round draft pick needs to be producing.
Yeah, well, I think that if you go back a few weeks with Seattle, that was a game that we saw Ricky Pearsall get open and Brock Purdy not make the throws. And now looking back on it, it could be that Brock Purdy didn't have the arm to make the throws, right? If he's dealing with the arm injury, maybe he didn't think he could make those tight throws that were going to be to the corner routes and those things that Ricky Pearsall was getting open. So maybe we can attribute it to that. Then against Green Bay, you get Brandon Allen at quarterback. And Brandon Allen was reading the wrong side of progressions. He wasn't going through progressions well. So he did miss Ricky Pearsall. The problem is not Ricky Pearsall getting open. That is not the problem. The problem is he hasn't been getting the football from the quarterbacks. I think some of it, like we said with Seattle, was probably a situation where Brock Purdy not all the way comfortable with his arm or being able to deliver some of the footballs he should. And we all who watched that game know Brock Purdy ran when he shouldn't have ran. There were times to get rid of the ball, and he just didn't. He missed some big-time plays against the Seattle Seahawks. When you look at Brandon Allen, he just could barely get the football where he needed to get consistently. Even some of his good throws were into coverage. It just wasn't great. And then this last week, I think you were dealing with weather situations, and there wasn't a lot of guys open, but I did see some of the same problems that befell Brandon Allen falling to Brock Purdy, where he read the wrong side of the progression and didn't get to his guys, where he missed open receivers again. So I don't think this is a situation where we're looking at Ricky Pearsall and saying this is an indictment of him and that he's not a good player. He is a good player. He's going to get open, but the 49ers do have to find a way to get him the ball. He's consistently being able to get open, especially when it comes to routes to the outside, those long throws. I know those are difficult for quarterbacks, but that is what he does really well. And the 49ers just need to get the football. Now, I have seen people say we need to work less through Jawan Jennings. Jawan Jennings isn't that guy. But no, Jawan Jennings is that guy because Jawan Jennings is playing X. And if you notice, that's what happened with Brandon Ayuk. The offense often works through that X receiver a lot, and then you pepper it everywhere else. So that's why Jawan is getting more opportunities and more looks because he's manning that X role. And so that's kind of why you see the discrepancy between what Jawan Jennings is getting targets and catches compared to a Ricky Pearsall or a Deebo Samuel, even though if they want to turn this thing around over the next 5 games, they've got to find a way to disperse the ball more to George Kittle, more to Ricky Pearsall, and more to Deebo Samuel in some opportunities for them to make plays with their legs after they make the catch.
Yeah, George Kittle had 1 catch, I think. 2 balls were thrown his way. What was going on there? Was he just not in routes very much? Was he blocking a lot? I think after the game, he said something kind of to that effect. He seemed a little perplexed that he didn't get the ball more. What did you see there?
Yeah, I think that he didn't go out for passes as much. I think the way that the Bills were using an extra offensive tackle, Kyle Shanahan kind of used George Kittle in that thought process. And a big reason why is the 49ers are light when it comes to offensive tackle. You don't have an extra guy to put in on the outside. You know, you did the experiment with Jalen Moore, but that was when you had Trent Williams. You don't have that right now. So you don't have that guy. So you had to be George Kittle. He's the only guy you trust. It couldn't be Eric Saubert. So yeah, it's snow game like that. You're trying to run the football. You know, plays down the field are going to be few and far between. But there were some opportunities that were missed that George Kittle was potentially open. Some of the times he felt like he was open. I don't think he was. I think he was a little bit covered more than he is. I think George Kittle is one of those guys that thinks he's always open, and I love that about a player. But there were some situations where Brock Purdy had one-on-one, Rasul Douglas, one-on-one with George Kittle, and normally you're like, you know what? This is going to be a George Kittle win, but not in the snow. George Kittle was not moving as good as he should, and because of that, you couldn't go there. So I think it's a situation where they could have got him the ball more. They were asking more of him to block, so there wasn't as many targets. But I definitely thought George Kittle was going to have a much bigger game because of the matchup problem that he was going to present to the linebackers and the safeties of the Buffalo Bills, where they should have had a distinct advantage.
Yeah, the snow really threw a wrench into that. Jalen Moore and Ben Barch played on Sunday. They played well. What did you see when you watched those two? Barch was playing left guard and Moore was playing left tackle. What did you see there?
Yeah, I would say offensive line is probably one of the toughest things to evaluate in this snow game because we saw so many defensive linemen just slipping out of the stance, not being able to rush as well as they normally should. But I did remember what we had saw from Green Bay. Jalen Moore played pretty good against Green Bay. Ben Barch had come in at the end of that football game in place of Aaron Banks after the concussion. So I kind of had a reference point to build off of. I thought both players played well in this football game. I thought in the second half, the Buffalo Bills did some good line stunts that did cause some problems for Barch and Jalen Moore being able to pass off and do some of the things they needed to do when it came to pass protection. But one of the things I loved about Ben Barch, and I'm going to give him some flowers here, is I thought that his bottom half and the way that he used his legs to get his body around into position for blocks was far superior from what we saw from Aaron Banks this season. Part of the reason is Banks has been dealing with a calf, and you can tell he's more upper body this year. He's more stiff. His lower half is not able to fluidly move, which means he doesn't always get himself in prime position, and defenders are able to disengage and make plays. So I thought that Barch did that at a high level. I loved his athleticism getting to the second level, which I thought he did a pretty good job. I don't think he went out and took the job away from Aaron Banks, but I think he maybe earned himself a series here or there. Why not go 3 series Aaron Banks, 1 series Ben Barch, and see what this guy can do? Because next year you're evaluating what you could have at left guard. And as much as people want a better option, Ben Barch could be a cheap option for the 49ers at left guard, especially if he could play the way he played at Buffalo. So we'll see. I thought he did a good job. I thought Jalen Moore over 2 weeks has done a pretty good job and has proved to be a consistent backup for the 49ers. So overall, it was a good job by the left side of the offensive line.
Yeah, CJ Gray in the chat says that Ben Barch is better than Aaron Banks. So yeah, I don't know if you're seeing the same thing, but you said that that Banks hasn't played as well this season.
Yeah, I think it's a little early to say Ben Barch is better than Aaron Banks, just because we've seen a lot more Aaron Banks than we've seen Ben Barch. I will say that, Barch looked good in this football game, but I want to know how much of that was snow and how much is going to be when they get into a normal game where there's normal settings. What will that offensive guard do, Ben Barch, against a fast defensive tackle? What would have happened if Ed Oliver could have moved laterally really quickly? That could have presented a problem for Ben Barch. I don't know for sure. So that's something interesting to watch. So I don't think he took Aaron Banks' job by any stretch, but I think he put himself in the conversation for maybe a little bit extra playing time.
What did you see from Nick McLeod? He is the new guy. He was with the Giants earlier this season, and now he's obviously with the 49ers. They had what they started him at nickel. Is that right? I think he was at nickel.
Yeah, he was.
What did you see from him? Because he's more, I think, a special teams guy. Is this a guy that they might like in the future, or was this just kind of a situation where, look, we have Lenore's out, we need to get somebody in there in that spot?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. I don't think I expected to see McLeod in this game other than special teams. I was kind of expecting Isaac Yedem to start on the outside and for Renardo Green to man the nickel in the Deommodore Lenore role. And they decided not to do that. They decided to go with McLeod in the slot. And the second play of the game, he stuck his nose in there and made a tackle at the line of scrimmage. He did a really good job filling in there. I don't think it was a clean performance from McLeod. I thought there were a couple of mistakes here and there. But what do we expect from a guy who's been on the roster for a few weeks? Understanding this defense and where he's supposed to be. I like the player. I want to see how he continues to develop. I think there's going to be some opportunities for him to get more playing time. I don't think he's a lost cause, and he's still a young guy. So I like to see what he could continue to do. But in all stretches and imaginations, we don't want McLeod on the field. We want Charvarius Ward, De'Amara Lenore, and Renardo Green. Like, those are the guys we want out there. But I do think McLeod has earned himself, opportunities to try to prove to the 49ers that he could maybe replace a guy like Darrell Luter Jr., who the 49ers drafted a couple years ago, who hasn't really, panned out. Maybe McLeod is a guy now that could be a versatile nickel / outside corner if you need him, that can help on special teams. So I think McLeod's playing for next year more than this year. And I think that's what the 49ers are looking at. But I want the 49ers to get a little bit more interesting when it comes to personnel groupings on 3rd and long. This week it was an extra safety. I still would love to see some dime coverage, put in an extra corner. I think that they're worried too much about tackling, but I think it's important to kind of start matching up with what some of these teams are doing. When they go heavy sets, let's get an extra defensive lineman in there. When they're going very light, let's go to dime, especially 3rd and 10 and beyond, and let's just play with our personnel groupings a little bit better. I think that's one area Nick Sorensen needs to get a lot better at.
Let's play a word association game. This will be fun. I'm going to give you a name, and you give me the first word that pops in your head. All right? Let's start with Jake Brendel.
Inconsistent. I think that's the best thing to say about Jake Brendel, because you're going to look at the numbers for this game, and this is why I was cautious about Ben Barch, is Jake Brendel was the number 1 pass blocking offensive lineman in this football game against Buffalo. And part of the reason was there was a lot of help when it came to double teams, Dominic Pooney helping out or Ben Barch. But also because guys aren't moving as fast, they can't get that push when they're getting a push on him. So I think he's been inconsistent all year. I thought Buffalo game was he just had 2 of his worst games. This was probably one of his better games. Run blocking still wasn't fantastic, but it was better than it has been. That's why I'm wondering how much the elements benefited some of the offensive linemen for the 49ers. So to me, he's just inconsistent. I think, this is just me personally, the 49ers need to address center. They have been pushing this thing down the road. Yeah. Center needs to be addressed during free agency or the draft, one of the two. They need to get somebody in there and upgrade the position.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And I think inconsistent is probably nicer than what most 49ers fans would have been. CJ Gray says Brendel sucks. That's probably
the word most people would say.
Yeah. All right, next on the list is Deebo Samuel. What is your word to describe the first word that pops in your head for Deebo?
Waldo. I think, where's he at? You know what I mean? I just don't know where he's at right now. And, they tried to get him the ball in some screen situations, and it didn't work out. They had one that he almost broke. Jake Brendel, our guy, missed the block that probably would have caused Deebo to get a lot more yardage, and maybe the 49ers would have got some points at the end of the first half. But it's been like a where's Waldo for Deebo Samuel this year. He disappears in the red zone. He only has 1 touchdown right now, and that was on a big explosive play where he was able to take it to the house. Other than that, it's been tough sledding for Deebo this year. And we keep expecting and waiting for Deebo to take over the way he did in 2021, or even some of the stretches in 2023 when you think about like the Philadelphia game and big-time games like that. And it just has never come this season. And I can't explain why. It was the best training camp I've seen from Deebo Samuel since I started going, and I have no idea why he is just disappearing. But it's starting to get a little bit frustrating, I'm sure, for him, and I'm sure for his teammates, because right now it's just not clicking. And I'll tell you what the effect it's having. The Buffalo Bills actually ignored most of the window dressing with Deebo Samuel. He went in motion on an orbit motion, no response. He went on a fake handoff, no response. Those types of things are going to make it so Deebo's either going to have to make plays or he is losing value as far as being a decoy, and that's not good for the 49ers offense.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, he as a return man, he's been looking really good. But you're right, man. He's just kind of been invisible. I don't know what's going on with him. He seems like the kind of guy that would have a chip on his shoulder that would motivate him to do some great things. But he also seems like the kind of person who could get down and start letting things get in his head. And so maybe just some of the drama that the 49ers have dealt with this season is affecting him mentally. I think that that's a possibility. And I wonder if anybody's whispering into his ear that he needs to lock in, because it's so ironic that he said that to Jake Moody, which caused the little scuffle situation. And since then, he just hasn't been that great. So that's kind of been interesting to me. Next one is Brock Purdy.
Oh man, I think good. I don't think it's been great, but I think it's been good. I don't know what Brock Purdy's dealing with when it comes to the shoulder. I don't know how healthy he was in this football game. I know a lot of people left watching this game thinking he's having more trouble throwing again in the weather conditions. I didn't see that as much as I saw maybe against Seattle a couple years ago, or even Green Bay last year in the playoffs, where it felt like in the first half he just couldn't throw the football. I do think it's a little bit different, the snow wetness of a football compared to the rain, and I think that definitely plays a part in it. But I thought that in this game there just wasn't as many open receivers as we've seen in other weeks, so I couldn't be as hypercritical of him in that category, where it wasn't like he was just missing guys. And then when there were guys open, they were getting pressure from the defensive line of the Buffalo Bills. So to me, I thought that he's been good this season. I don't think he was great in this game by any stretch. I think he was just probably average Brock Purdy. And I know he only threw for 100 yards, but there wasn't a lot of yards to be had in this football game. This one was out of control real quick. So I don't think this is going to be the one that we're able to find out who Brock Purdy is. I think we're going to find out over the next couple of weeks, but I'm curious how healthy he actually is, because I don't feel the same aura around Brock Purdy right now as we felt at times through different games, where he was kind of leading the charge with the emotional type things. And right now he looks a little bit more reserved. And that's kind of the feeling I get from a lot of those players right now.
That is an interesting observation there. I think that part of the issue where fans are saying he can't throw a wet ball, he can't throw a snowy ball, I think some of that comes from the fumble where he tried to throw and it slipped out of his hand before he had a chance. So that's probably one reason. But yeah, I think he has 5 games left to show the team, to show John Lynch, to show Kyle Shanahan what kind of quarterback he can be. Early in the season, we talked about how, hey, he's looking really good. In fact, I think at one point we were saying he looks better than he did last year. He wasn't putting up some of the numbers, but he just looked really good, especially in spite of the fact that he was playing without McCaffrey. Ayuk was just coming back to the team and wasn't himself yet. And Purdy was looking pretty good, but he's just the last handful of weeks he's not been good, and not as good, I would say. And CJ said in the chat that Brock is 8-8 in his last 16 games, so that's definitely something they need to correct. And I just think it's going to be really important these next 5 weeks, seeing how he plays, because if they're about to put down 50, 60 million a year on this guy, they need to make sure he can handle carrying the team. And I'm just not sure he's the kind of quarterback that can carry a team.
Well, I don't think there's that many quarterbacks in general that can carry a team. I think Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen are probably the 2 guys that can carry a team. Besides that, pretty much everyone else needs a really good supporting cast. When you're talking about even a guy like Jalen Hurts, without A.J. Brown and without those guys, he can't carry a football team. C.J. Stroud, he can't carry a football team, and he's a really good young player. We just don't have quarterbacks in this league that are Mahomes and Josh Allen, right? This is that John Elway, Dan Marino, certain guys that can carry a football team physically, just superior to everyone else. And then there's just a bunch of good quarterbacks that if you surround them with good talent, they can win you playoff games and potentially a Super Bowl. And I think that's the category Brock Purdy's in. So I don't expect him to ever carry this football team, maybe carry us in moments, a lot like Detroit in the NFC Championship game last year, where he did things with his legs and he made things happen. The potential that he has there, I think, is something that we can all like. But he's not Josh Allen. He's not Patrick Mahomes. We know what he is, and he can be one of those guys, but you're always going to have pretty good talent around Brock Purdy. But I think that's probably the case with 30 other quarterbacks in the league as well.
Yeah, and CJ mentions that the 49ers defense has allowed 35 a game which has done Brock a disservice. So certainly that's not helping either. Next name here is Evan Anderson.
Impressive. I think he's been impressive, the turnaround that he's had. I think that a lot of people were very high and hot and heavy on who he was coming in out of college. And I think that if you saw him at training camp day one and you see him now, this is a complete potential thing because he was not playing well early on. And even in preseason, it wasn't great. And we've seen him get a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. And the reason I use the word impressive is not so much that he's playing better than all the other defensive tackles on the team, but that he's playing so well for an undrafted rookie. And I think that's the category that I'm putting him in. He does a pretty good job against the run. He hasn't really shown a lot in as far as pass rush. I know he got a sack earlier when he knocked the ball out of the quarterback's hand and that sort of thing. One interesting play in this game, and I actually chuckled very much when I was breaking it down on Patreon, was there's a play where Josh Allen is rolling to the right and Fred Warner picks up a player going to the end zone. I know they made a big deal about it, but no one caught that Dawson Knox was run blocking and then kind of just released. And Evan Anderson finds himself running with him in coverage. I don't know why he's in coverage. He's not supposed to be in coverage, but he's running stride for stride with Dawson Knox. It's one of the funniest things I saw. It reminds me of young guys who play football like in high school and all of a sudden, I'm going into coverage for no reason. But yeah, I think he's been impressive this season. And I think they can be excited about what he could be in the future because he's got a lot of ability. Sky's the limit for him.
So CJ said that he was talking about the Cincinnati defense letting Burrow down. I didn't see Burrow's name in there, so that's why I thought he was talking about Purdy. But I did think that 35 a game seemed high for the 49ers defense. So that makes sense. Next one in our word association game is Jair Brown.
Oh, mediocre. I had to search for that one. I'm trying to be as nice as I can be, but it has been a consistent thing every single week that there are concerns about Jair Brown. And it's not just tackling. It's not just in run fits. It's also in coverage as well. And, I find myself when I'm going over it, I finally just had to take the gloves off and say, look, this is what I would say to my players. This is what I'm going to say about Jair. And Jair has been inconsistent at best. He hasn't been great this year. He's been mediocre. I believe that Malik Mustafa has passed him, and I think everyone agrees with that. But I think it's now time that the 49ers need to see if their defense is better with Deshaun Gibson at safety. And with them opening the window for Talanoa Hufanga, I think that they need to take a real look at Talanoa Hufanga over the next 5 games. If he plays, I don't know if he's going to play the next 5. He'll play maybe some of those games. They might need to evaluate bringing Hufanga back. And I think a lot of people were thinking that was a place the 49ers could save some money and go with Jair and Malik, but I don't think so. I think they need to find a safety next to Malik Mustafa, whether that's Talanoa Hufanga, someone they draft, someone they sign in free agency. But I just don't think Jair Brown is ready to go. And I don't want to give up on the player and say, hey, we just cut this guy. I do think he's got value, but right now he's not playing to the level that they were expecting him to play. And you're seeing it in every element of the game. And he wasn't just his fault that they got a big James Cook 65-yard run for a touchdown. But it was a lot his fault. Jalen Graham can share some of it, but it's on him as well. The big throw to Dawson Knox up the seam, that can be put on him as well, not going where he's supposed to go in coverage. So to me, it hasn't been good for Jair Brown. And it's tough to say because we're huge fans of him, and we thought sky was the limit coming off last year, but right now it's just not working out.
So a 49ers fan says, fire Sorensen and hire a legitimate DC. Which brings me to our next name on the word association game, Nick Sorensen.
Well, what's funny, too, is he also said, Ant, you are a better DC. Sorensen, so I wouldn't go that far. I think with Nick Sorensen, I don't know if there's a single word that goes into this thing because it is a complex situation. There are definitely things I like that he does, and there are some things that I don't like that I've seen from him. And I'm not over on the other side where everyone is, where it's like fire Sorensen. But I do think that he's kind of in the middle for me, where I don't think he's a for sure, let's for sure bring him back. I think we need to make some changes. There needs to be some wholesale changes in some certain areas. one of the things I've brought up for weeks now is the personnel groupings. I think that those need to be adjusted. You could help yourself out in a few situations. And then there are some things he did in this game that were good. I mean, he created some opportunities with some run blitzes for some stops in the backfield. But as the game progresses, there's just not enough adjustments with the other team that's adjusting. And I'm really surprised about that. So you've got a situation where you have him and Brandon Staley that both understand football in the NFL and need to make adjustments. And I just don't think there's enough. I would love to see them go force the issue, go make teams, adjust to what they do. They just haven't been willing to do that. They're kind of just going out there, and it looks like sometimes going through the motions. There's lulls in the football game. And I think that they just need to be a little bit more hyper aggressive and just go force the issue all the time, because right now teams are getting down the field. Now, with Buffalo, it's a different situation. I said this last week, and I believed it wholeheartedly. They proved it out on the field. If Buffalo gets in the red zone, they're scoring a touchdown. They're 63% inside the red zone scoring touchdowns. That was not going to be a good thing for the 49ers, and that's exactly what happened. Every time they got in the red zone, they scored a touchdown. So Sorensen has been bad in many areas, and he's had some bright spots as well. I'm not all the way on the fire Sorensen train, but I'm definitely sitting in the middle, and it could go one way or the other depending on how these 5 games go.
Last name is Brian Schneider.
Bad? I mean, it's been bad. It just hasn't been good. There continues to be mistakes on special teams. I just don't know how the 49ers keep Brian Schneider. Now, I try to listen to everything that John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan say, and try to pick up some information on it. And last week when John Lynch was talking to Matt Mayoko in that pre-game show, he said that he doesn't really have a problem with the coaches. He's out there at practice. He sees the way the coaches are coaching, and we're having a translation problem of the discipline they're displaying at practice compared to the discipline they're displaying at the game. Sometimes that is a defense of the coaching staff. So I don't know what they actually feel about Brian Schneider. I know what we all feel about Brian Schneider, that there's been too many mistakes. But I do believe that they think there's been too many players that they've had to work in this, and that it's made it difficult for the special teams to be consistently good. So I don't know exactly how they feel, but I think that it might be a good move for the 49ers to go ahead and get a new, fresh special teams coordinator in the offseason. And maybe Kyle Shanahan will do that. They need to address this. They need to make sure they shore up that side and that part of the football team.
Yeah, the word that I would use for Brian Schneider is gone, because I think that he's going to be gone. It's a throwback to Eddie DeBartolo saying that about Mark Trestman. He's gone. I think that's going to happen. It's probably time for a change. Can Isaac Guerendo carry the load at running back the rest of the way?
He's going to have to. So, I mean, I think that they're going to find some opportunities, for him to potentially, get some good looks. I think that they're also going to have to count on Debo a little bit. I think Debo is going to have to get more involved in the run game. Now, I did love the claim for Israel Abanikanda. So this is a guy that I was a huge fan of coming out of 2023 draft, a young guy, 22 years old. And so this is a guy that they have that they can evaluate. So he's been playing in the Jets scheme, so he has an idea of what the 49ers do already. It should be a quick adjustment, but it's going to come down to Guerendo and Abanikanda, because I don't think that they've got Patrick Taylor Jr. I don't think that he can add a lot to this 49ers run game. There's nothing dynamic about him, but it's going to come down to Guerendo. And guess what? They're going to get a good look, right? This is what happened to Elijah Mitchell his rookie year, just in training camp. Raheem Mostert got hurt. Well, you got to get thrusted out there, kid. Well, now you've got to experience Isaac Guerendo. The good thing is, when he gets out on the edge, the dude's got speed for days, and he's gone. Mm-hmm. Saw the play where he scored the touchdown against the Bills. Those types of things could be huge for the 49ers. They got to find ways to get him the ball in space. If they can, he's going to do well. My problem is, I want to know what his vision's going to look like, because sometimes his vision escapes him. The same thing that happens to Jordan Mason. So we'll see where he's at, if he's really confident and comfortable within this offense, but he's going to have to do it. There's no other options. You look around, it's Israel Abanikanda that just got here. It's Patrick Taylor, who you just had on your practice squad. And then it's Debo. And those are your options, and you're just going to have to make it happen with those guys.
The 49ers are favored to beat the Bears, but there is a chance that they could lose this game. In fact, I saw that the NFL Network crew that makes their predictions each week are leaning toward the 40 or the Bears. There were a few of them that are picking the 49ers, but more of them are picking the Bears. So what needs to happen for the 49ers to avoid the upset? Because if they lose this game, I expect rioting in the streets. I expect airplanes carrying banners with angry messages about firing people. This is a game they have to win. So what do they need to do to make sure they win this game?
Well, they need to go out and they need to make sure they score in the red zone. You can't have mistakes. You gotta score touchdowns. The Chicago Bears offense this season hasn't been consistent. They've tried. They fired their offensive coordinator. They thought that was going to be the big change. It really hasn't produced too many points. So you got an opportunity where if you score, 24, 27 points in this game, which should be doable for a 49ers offense, whether you have Christian McCaffrey or not, that is a situation you can win because they will kick a lot of field goals. So you've got to just make sure you get touchdowns, but you've got to execute. This has been the 49ers problem and why they've started losing. They don't execute as well consistently, and they turn over the football a little bit too much. When they were winning football games, they were a +6 turnover differential team. Now they're a -3 turnover differential team. That is a huge 9 turnover swing. Not getting turnovers on defense, turning the ball over too much on offense. Those are huge reasons why the 49ers aren't winning. So the categories you have to win when you go into these games, if you want to be a good football team, you need to win on third down offensively and defensively. You need to win on turnovers, and you need to win over in the red zone. If the 49ers are able to win in those categories, they can beat the Bears. I think teams are expecting, and a lot of the analysts are expecting the Bears to get a little bit of a push because Eberflus got fired. So they think there's going to be a little bit of a wave of positivity that you see sometimes with this. But we didn't see with the offensive coordinator. I'm not for sure it's going to happen just because you fired your head coach. But the 49ers got to go out and prove it. 5.5 seems about right for the spread here for the 49ers.
Great stuff. Ant, any final words before we take off this week?
It's just that, you know what? If this game doesn't go the 49ers way and they lose, the season will officially be done. And I think that's when the 49ers will probably go ahead and put a guy like Fred Warner maybe, out for the rest of the season and let him rest. You'll no longer hear about Trent Williams talking about coming back. They'll go ahead and put him on the shelf as well. So this is a big game to determine what the 49ers do for the remaining 4 and how important those games are. I'd love to see a few more important games for the mere fact I love watching competitive football. And I think if the 49ers lose, it won't be as competitive against the Rams and against the Dolphins. But it's a huge one. And the 49ers need a little bit of help too. Arizona needs to defeat the Seattle Seahawks. So if you were ever going to root for a team this week, root for the Arizona Cardinals to win, root for the Los Angeles Rams to lose. If that happens, and then the 49ers win on Thursday Night Football against the Rams, guess what? The 49ers are in the mix to make the playoffs, and yes, it's a legitimate chance.
That would be crazy after all that they've been through if they have a fighting chance. Still slim chance, but there is a chance. So we're going to keep on pushing forward and keep on hoping that the 49ers will win. A lot of fans want them to lose out. Saw somebody in the chat say that a minute ago. I'm not there yet. I want to see them keep winning while there is still hope of making the postseason. That's all we have today for this show. Thanks for everybody for watching. Thanks especially to those that were in the chat with us, keeping the discussion alive. We appreciate it. Everybody have a great rest of your week. Yell loud, cheer loud, because the 49ers need to win this game against the Chicago Bears.